The news tonight, St. James North voted for a new representative today. The candidates in today's by-election remain upbeat about the process. The Met Office issues a message to Barbadians for the upcoming hurricane season. And in sports, both West Indies teams lose their limited overs opening matches in Europe.
Broadcasting from our studios in the Pine St. Michael, this is CBC NewsNight, starting now.
Very good evening to you. I'm Lisa Broom. Thank you so much for tuning in. In our top story tonight, the ballots have been cast, the polls are closed, and all that's left now is the counting and the declaration of a winner. We are, of course, talking about today's by-election in St. James North, contested by the BLP's Chad Blackman, the DLP's Felicia Dujon, Stephanie Williams of the Community Empowerment Party, and the Bajan Free Party's Alex Mitchell. Counting is taking place at the Gordon Greenwich Primary School, and it is there that we join our Crystal Hoyt now live. Crystal, good evening.
Good night, Lisa, and good night to our viewers.
So, Crystal,
now, I can tell you that
Go ahead, tell us how things are proceeding.
I can tell you that unfortunately, there has been no ballot boxes arriving here at the Gordon Greenwich Primary School thus far. We are awaiting the ballot boxes. But this constituency in particular, there are 4 candidates vying for this particular seat. Sorry about that, it was breaking up. There are 4 candidates vying for this particular seat. Alex Mitchell of the Bajan Free Party, Stephanie Williams of the Community Empowerment Party, of course the 2 main political parties, Chad Blackman of the Barbados Labour Party and Felicia Dujon of the Democratic Labour Party. We've seen all of the candidates here at the Gordon Greenwich Primary School, and we are still just waiting for these ballot boxes to come so that the count can begin.
So you're there now, Crystal, for the results, but you were also there this morning when the doors opened. So tell us about your experience from earlier today.
Well, I was at the Gordon Greenwich Primary School this morning from as early as 5:30, and there were about 50 early voters here just waiting until the polling stations opened at 6. And since then, there was a steady stream of people coming in, and it really reflected that from Gordon Greenwich Primary School in particular, that there was a good voter turnout.
Thank you very much, Crystal. That is our Crystal Hoyt there at Gordon Greenwich Primary School, waiting where the counting will take place from today's St. James North by-election. Of course, we'll be going back and forth with Crystal throughout the newscast to get a sense of what's happening there as the evening goes by. Now, earlier in the day, hundreds of voters in St. James North made their way to the various polling stations across the constituency, some of them even before the stations opened at 6 a.m. And it was all to ensure that they placed that X next to the candidate they want to be their next parliamentary representative. Anesta Henry was there and she filed this report.
80-year-old Carletta Best was one of the earliest voters at the People's Worship Center, Roadview, St. Peter. Whenever there is a general or by-election, Granny ensures she is there to cast her vote.
I customer vote and I said, 80 years, I think I know come down. I went to every session we had. So I did doing this party all of my life. So I know what to do.
And the grandmother could be seen encouraging her grandson to go into the polling station and exercise his constitutional right. In fact, Ms. Best says this is her advice to all young people in Barbados.
Of course, you got to do it. So my one about tell your constitutional right is to do what you got to do. And know who you're going to do it for and with, okay? That's very practical.
Roger Lewis, who voted at the All Saints Training Center, described his voting experience as quick, easy, and simple.
It's always important to vote because when you vote, you could comment on anything that happened in the country. If something goes in your favor, you could talk about it. If it's not in your favor, you comment about it because you vote. But if you don't vote, you can't. You should say anything that may satisfy anything.
Selwyn Boyce was at Gordon Greenwich Primary School early to cast his vote, all in an effort to get away from the rush.
Because they feel that when you do everything early, You get away from the rush, especially on the election time. You get away from all the rush and the hassle and bustling. But it's my constitutional right to come out, vote, and be a part of Barbados. Because voting is a part of Barbados, and I am so proud and happy to see that all of our elections have been clean, good, no violence, and I feel proud being a part of all of this.
Edwin Brathwaite was one of several voters that turned up at St. Albans Anglican Church early to exercise his constitutional right before heading to work.
It's my duty. It's a duty to vote.
31-year-old Zoe Burnett says during her younger years, she was not as in tune with the political landscape as she should have been. However, that all changed when she became a mother. And this is why she turned up to the St. Albans Anglican Church to cast her vote.
Having children and knowing that their future depends on what we do here today is very important to me. So I feel a sense of pride because I'm setting an example for them to, decide how their future can turn out. So I feel good.
Voters who had until 6 p.m. to cast their votes will know who will be their next member of parliament sometime tonight. Anesta Henry, CBC News.
And all eyes are indeed on the St. James North constituency to find out who will be the next Member of Parliament. Two of the island's northern parishes were abuzz with activity earlier today as constituents came out to cast their votes. And as the day wore on, the four candidates remained positive and upbeat through the process. Rachel Agard was in the field when she filed this report.
All roads led to St. James North today as four candidates vied to become the next representative for the constituents. Barbados Labour Party's candidate Chad Blackman, Democratic Labour Party's Felicia Dujon, Bajan Free Party's Alex Mitchell, and Community Empowerment Party and first-timer Stephanie Williams were out in the field ensuring a smooth transition and assisting where needed to get their supporters to the 7 polling stations across 9 districts. Mr. Blackman says, regardless of tonight's results, this is a long-term relationship he is forming with the constituents. And he says one thing this by-election has done is shown a lot of goodwill across the constituency.
And this by-election really, to my mind, has brought out something that oftentimes people say it doesn't exist anymore, but good old-time Bajan values of working with people and helping out. And volunteerism is something that we really have to nurture even more in our society. Oftentimes we think that to develop, things have to be done on a work basis. I work, you pay me. Yes, there's room for that, that's needed. But also serving your fellow man. As my school motto always says, omnibus disque prodest, strive to be of service to everybody, is something that I live to the core. And that is the thing that I like most about this campaign. People are genuinely interested in the outcome.
Ms. Dujon says the day has been encouraging and the DLP camp ensured that those who needed to get to the polls had the necessary assistance. But she says she was leaving the outcome of today's by-election in God's hands.
I know that people have been praying. They have been calling since last night, even this morning. People have been praying. I think it will be a defining moment. I think it's very important what we're doing because it's helping them to exercise their democratic right. Regardless of what choices that they make, I think it's our duty to assist.
First-timer Williams says regardless of the outcome, she has already won the race and she has pledged to maintain a presence in the constituency.
When I went out into the constituency, I would have told persons to pray about it. However the Spirit directs you to go, then go with that. The choice is ultimately yours, right? And you have to go with what you believe is best for you. At the end of the day, you have to look at everything that's going on around you, and you have to decide if what you're seeing happening is what you want to see. Barbados, the direction that Barbados is going forward.
Meanwhile, Mitchell says he would not be visiting the constituency due to transportation issues, but he was hopeful of securing a win.
guess I would hope to win, because that's the purpose of running. You don't run just to be running. It's a very long and drawn-out process of walking the area and talking to people. As you can hear, my voice is gone from talking to people and informing them and answering their questions, which they love what they hear.
The polls closed at 6 p.m. and the counting of ballots should be underway. Rachel Agard, CBC News.
Amid reports from the Barbados Labour Party's St. James North campaign office at Lower Carlton in St. James of a healthy voter turnout, one government minister is pressing for the implementation of digital voting in the future, and that's to ensure even more people are empowered to exercise their franchise. Minister of Training and Tertiary Education Sandra Husbands told CBC News one of the concerns raised by potential voters is the stipulation that most people must vote in person at a designated polling station. Now, she stops short of saying who ought to drive this change, but she believes the elderly and disabled are most disadvantaged by the current rules of in-person voting.
One of the things that we have taken note of, because we are now an aged population, you do have a number of seniors who have mobility issues. And one of the things that we will have to consider as a country is to move to electronic voting, to set up systems where people can vote from their phones or what have you. But that is a fairly big undertaking. It's fairly costly, and you also have to get the buy-in of the electorate that it will be safe and so on, and that it will be fair, etc. But we will have to do that to be able to allow those who are immobile and for whom getting up, bathing, waiting for medication to kick in, getting appropriate transport, getting somebody to come with you, making the effort to get in the polling station, to put that mark, and then make your way back home. That's a huge undertaking. A number of them are happy to do it, but we can make life a whole lot easier if we can start to use electronic means. And this was something that was shared with me just this morning by a family member who has a relative who cannot move but would have wanted to vote in this election.
And CBC's Anne-Marie Burke was at the St. Albans Primary School when the polls closed.
It now being the hour of 6 o'clock in the afternoon, I declare the poll in this polling station for the by-election of a member of the House of Assembly for the constituency of St. James North closed.
And with that declaration, it brought to an end 12 hours of voting here in the St. James North constituency as they seek to elect a representative for the Barbados Parliament. Voting started promptly this morning at 6 a.m. and from all accounts, it was an incident-free day as polls were closed at 6 p.m. When we arrived here at the St. Albans Primary School with just an hour left into voting, persons were trickling in to ensure that they exercise their right in this process. At this stage, the boxes will now be closed and be transported to the Gordon Greenwich Primary School where the counting will begin, and then there will be the declaration of who will be the new candidate for this constituency. Reporting on the campaign trail for the St. James North by-election, I'm Anne-Marie Burke for CBC News.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. And with us now to give his take and his projections for tonight is political analyst Peter Wickham. Good evening, Peter.
Hi, good evening. Good evening. It's good to be with you.
Thanks for coming, Peter. So tell us, what is your take of all that's been happening over the last few days?
Yeah, I mean, the election is interesting. Elections are always interesting. I think that this is one in which the expected turnout, the expected outcome is pretty much well known. The constituency is the second strongest nationally for the Barbados Labour Party, and the presumption is that the BLP will hold on to it. Certainly for me as an analyst, what I'm looking at to see is voter turnout. The St. George North by-election was one in which voter turnout went down. So the question is, will the voter turnout go down as well on this occasion? I think I'm also looking to see whether the level of engagement is different. And certainly when you looked at the campaign, I mean, this was a more traditional hype in terms of the campaign on this occasion than was the case in the last two, which would have been St. George North and then the National. Of course, those were COVID elections. So this is really the first post-COVID election that we get a chance to see the political parties back to their old self, so to speak. So I think that those would be the interest points. But in terms of the outcome, there's no reasonable expectation that the independent candidates will do well. I think we have to see how the DLP does. But again, the expectation is that the seat will continue to be a BLB seat.
So would you say that the outcome will be a strong indication of people's perception of the government's overall performance?
Well, this is a gauntlet that was thrown down by the opposition Democratic Labour Party, and they indicated that it would be a referendum on the performance of the government. In my view, that was odd messaging because it's a situation in which the Barbados Labour Party is likely to win. So I'm anxious to see the extent to which the messaging continues for the Democratic Labour Party, and if they accept that it is an assessment of population's views. So if the Barbados Labour Party wins, it doesn't mean that people are happy. My inclination is that it does not necessarily mean that people are all happy, but certainly this is the perception that has been put forward by the Democratic Labour Party, and I think that it is perhaps not the most wise presentation. But yes, a by-election is usually a general indicator of how people feel, but I think we have to look at things like turnout and certainly the size of the margin that if it is maintained previously.
So this, you said the Dems shaped it as how people feel about the government. Can you also look at it on the other side? While, as you said, the thought process is not that the DLP will win, but can you look at it as how people think about or how people see the DLP as progressing into rebuilding?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting argument, whether you can say that the converse, whether it is an assessment of the Democratic Labour Party, and certainly it's something I didn't think about, but yes, this will be the first chance for the new opposition leader to demonstrate what he's made of. So I think people will look to see Ralph Thorne, how they perform. To me, there was some disappointment that the campaign for the Democratic Labour Party did not have familiar faces up until the last. Certainly some of the faces that we've associated were not there. So I think there's a level of interest in knowing how he will perform as leader of the opposition. So from that perspective, yes, you get that balance that has come forward.
In one of our earlier stories in the earlier block tonight, you heard a young lady who is a mother who said she would not normally come out, but she's thinking of the election in terms of the future for her children. Put that up against what you said earlier, the turnout in the St. George North election wasn't that good. Another man tonight said, if you don't vote, you really don't have a say in what's happening. What do you think that's saying about how Bajans are feeling about elections and their duty to come out and vote?
Well, certainly the response from the mother is consistent with what I have learned to expect. I've done a lot of work on gender, and the reality is that when a person becomes a mother or a parent, invariably they are more keen and interested in the political process. So essentially she was reflecting what I know to be the case. So a person who is a woman who is not a mother is less likely to vote than a woman who is a mother. That's her expectation. The older persons tend to vote, so certainly the older people who spoke said what I would have expected them to say, that it is a duty, it's a responsibility. First person in line was 80-something years old. Again, that's entirely normal. So I think that that's the kind of voting behavior. A lot of us are concerned about low voter turnout. I would say that the low voter turnout has to be set against the reality that the number of people registered in each constituency are not likely to be the number of people who can vote because they're not available for different reasons. We actually got some data from this last election that we have over 2,000 people who are registered that are not able to vote because they've either moved, died, or are resident overseas for some reason. And I think that helps us to understand that there may be concerns on the ground about participation levels, but certainly the reality is that people are interested and keen of voting based on what you were hearing just now as well from people.
Finally, and it has to be very quickly because we have to wrap up, do you think the two candidates who are not from major parties will have any impact on the election?
I think they probably will give DLP supporters that are not excited something to think about. Normally we expect a split vote to impact on the DLP, so I think that if anything they will have an impact on the DLP's turnout. That would be my sense.
Thank you very much. Political analyst Peter Wickham joining us live on set. And of course, Peter, you will be on set when we do the election.
That's right.
Later on.
From 8 o'clock.
From 8 o'clock.
From 8 o'clock.
Yeah, so we will have Peter back on with Teacher Hines, I think, will be the person hosting that show. Join us at 8 o'clock. Stay with us. Thank you so much. And coming up, the Met Office has a message for all Barbadians. As this year's hurricane season draws near, Deputy Director of the Barbados Meteorological Services, Brian Murray, urges Barbadians to be prepared. He says the official forecast for the season will be presented at the Department of Emergency Management's headquarters on May 30th. However, he says, according to projections from the Colorado State University, there will be 17 named storms, of which 9 are expected to become hurricanes. Of those 9 hurricanes, 4 are set to become major weather occurrences of Category 3 or higher. Mr. Murray adds, even though the projected hurricanes are less than 2024, people must be mindful that over the past 2 years, Barbados has been affected by tropical cyclones early in this season. And he pointed to Hurricane Elsa in 2021, Tropical Storm Brett in 2023, and Major Hurricane Beryl in 2024.
Even if this year's systems pass safely off Barbados, there is still the chance of being affected by trailing feeder bands, which could generate heavy to violent showers, severe thunderstorms, and hazardous marine conditions. At this time, individuals, families, and businesses should be making preparations for this approaching hurricane season and make the necessary adjustments to their plans.
A Barbadian diplomat in Africa says the continent is a rising power, noting it possesses everything the world needs. High Commissioner of Barbados to Kenya, William Alexander MacDonald, says countries should not be distracted and lose focus.
People are not starting wars in Africa because Africa has nothing. It's because they want us to take our eyes off of the ball. They want us to know that in the bowels of Africa is everything the world needs. And so if we consider it, in my view, if we are together as Africans, we have to realize that it's probably the only continent in the world right now that could build a wall around it and survive and thrive and conquer. So what are the lessons that we learn? We learn resilience, we learn strength, we learn patience, but enough is enough.
High Commissioner MacDonald's remarks came during a panel discussion as part of Africa Day 2025 celebrations hosted by the United States International University Africa in Nairobi, Kenya. The theme, One Africa, explored the vision of a borderless Africa with shared institutions and open movement. He says despite being geographically separated, the Caribbean and Africa are not disassociated.
When we think of the Caribbean, don't think of a disparate place. We have not only been connected by the water, but by our bones. 18 million people were taken from West Africa and indeed some of East Africa at a time when the population could not have been more than 30 or 40 million, so almost half of the people that were taken. And they didn't choose the weakest.
Well, this just in, we've been told that the ballot boxes have started to arrive at the Gordon Greenwich Primary School, and the count is actually on. Of course, you know that this is in relation to the by-election in St. James North, and we will continue to keep you updated throughout the night. For the 23rd year in a row, Barbados has won a gold award at the Chelsea Flower Show in London. This year's theme was Bajans Love to Play and paid tribute to 5 pastimes: cricket, drafts, road tennis, dominoes and mass, and all of those are things that Barbadians enjoy at a world-class level. The display featured some of the island's local flora and fauna, including various species of ginger lilies, anthurium, orchids, ornamental pineapple plants and heliconias. President of the Barbados Horticultural Society, Jennifer Weech, says the team selected each plant not just for its beauty, but for its ability to tell a story. In business tonight, we're hearing that 5 pivotal areas will help shape the insurance industry in the coming years. The revelation from Vice President of Investment Management Services at Sagicor Asset Management Incorporated, Dexter Moore, at the inaugural Investor Summit at Hilton Barbados Resort yesterday. The insurance official says the summit is not merely another industry conference. It represents a commitment to shaping the future of investment management. Trevor Thorpe reports.
Partners. Insurance executive Dexter Moore says digital transformation, AI integration, and advanced analytics will revolutionize how we assess risks and enhance returns and how we interact with clients. He says the future of investment management is promising, but not without challenge. It demands innovative adaptability and a profound commitment to sustainable growth.
As we progress on this journey, let us seize the opportunities ahead with responsibility and of unwavering dedication to our clients' long-term success. Together, we can build an investment ecosystem that not only thrives amid volatility, but sets the benchmark for responsible, impactful, and prosperous investing.
President of the Chartered Financial Analyst Society of Barbados, Anderson Skate, says the summit is significant because in today's global economic environment, there's a general sense of uncertainty.
We are also seeing the ripple effects of new trade policies, potentially reshaping global supply chains and introducing a reorganization of the economic world order. However, as investment professionals, we know one fundamental truth. There can be no reward without risk. And within risk lies opportunity. For the astute investor, uncertainty isn't something to be feared. It is something to be understood, analyzed, and strategically approached.
Partner lead sustainability services at EY Caribbean, Maria Daniel, says reporting is necessary for the future of investor development.
So from an investment perspective, right now we're still looking at financial statements. Nobody's thinking about natural capital. Nobody's really studying, okay, is this company increasing their emissions, decreasing their emissions before we put them in our portfolio? That's what sustainable investment involves. It means we go deeper than a balance sheet and a P&L and a cash flow, and we start to look at what is being used to generate the revenue. We start looking at how are they treating their employees. We start looking at and delving deeper. But what it means is people have to disclose it.
The inaugural summit also discussed clean energy options in investment management. Trevor Thorpe for the Business Report.
Sports Night is brought to you by Power In. Pause is power. And by Dasani. Live first, Dasani after.
We head back over to Damien Best in the sports studio now for the second half in sports. Damien?
Thanks so much, Lisa. Well, Guardian Group Pride of Villa got the better of St. Barnabas when the BNA's 2025 Premier League season continued recently. With a look at the game is CBC's Anne-Marie Burke.
Taking netball into the communities has been garnering great support for the teams, as was seen at Friendship in the latest matchups. And the highlight, the Premier League match between Pride of Villa in the Black Bibs and St. Barnabas. Villa held the edge the entire game. After all, they had the true artillery in the circle in national shooters Latonia Blackman and Faye Agard. Agard there with the final save. We're heading back down court again. Blackman to wing attack Shakina Rock, who feeds the ball successfully into Agard. A nice overhead lob, and you sure bet it would be converted. This is not to say St. Barnabas were totally out of it, though the Villa defense was tight. They moved around the ball to create the opportunities, and shooter Jada Smith makes good of it. But Villa were running a good game from center to circle. Again, Agard is fed the ball in the right position, and she scores. So by the end of the third, Villa had command, and with passes like clockwork, well, obviously it worked. Agard going for that 90% odd shooting average as Villa end the third up 36-21. On the back foot, St. Barnabas stepped up their game. The passes were a lot more direct and into the circle. Smith was on point. We are heading back down court, and it's go to Derricka Haynes to make the play. She gets the obstruction call, so she must make it count, and that she does. but Villa had the edge and was just pressing to carry it right through to the final whistle. The St. Barnabas defense not making it easy. Agard had to catch her breath before converting here, but Villa would go on to win at 44-32. Anne-Marie Burt, CBC Sports.
Yeah, thanks, Anne-Marie. Cuthbert Moore, St. Jude's and Luther Thorne were in the winner's circle today when the National Sports Council Primary Schools netball competition continued. CBC's Anne-Margaret Boyce reports.
The Glebe St. George was the venue for primary schools netball. We pick up the action with Cuthbert Moore in red leading George Lamin 4-0. And immediately here, Cuthbert Moore meant business. Goal attack, Nakira Taylor hits the target. That's one of her 4 from 5 attempts. George Lamin gave away possession the next play and were made to pay for it. Taylor again gets her shot to go. Final score, Cuthbert Moore 6, George Lamin 0. To the second match, which featured St. Jude's in black and yellow and Grantley Prescott. This was a low-scoring encounter, and it only took one goal from Joshonna Hinkson to seal the deal. St. Jude's 1-0 winners over Grantley Prescott. Anmar Goodrich Boyce, CBC Sports.
Yeah, thanks so much, Anmar. And that is it for sports for tonight. Lisa, it's over to you.
Thanks, Damien. Thank you very much for tuning in. Good night.